We are in Genesis chapter 6. We are discussing the flood. We've been doing basically introductory things, and it has just been reading the text, going back to Genesis chapter 4 of the condition, well, the way the world happened to be there at the beginning. And we are discussing how the world was previously to the flood. That pre-flood or pre-diluvian world was very different than what we have today. And we know that it had to have been. We know that it had to have been. And even your archaeologists, atheists, and atheistic archaeologists and the like know very well that the earth was different years ago and that it was warmer everywhere. They talk about global warming today. They don't know what global warming is. And fact of the matter is, this world was much, much warmer, but it wasn't a place of catastrophe. It was a gentler place. You could grow things in regions that today you could not grow anything. In the tundra, good luck on growing much of anything in the tundra where you're having to deal with permafrost. But in sections of Alaska, northern Alaska, and Siberia, that there have been many, many finds in the permafrost. Permafrost is the place underneath the soil where it's always frozen. The summer does not thaw it out. The summer will thaw it down to a certain point, but then no further down. And things found in the permafrost that today is not found there. Somehow those things got there, whether they grew there or they lived there. Animals that have been found in Siberia that today they're not even close. You're not going to find them even close to Siberia today. They're much, much further away. So we know that the world was very different. Now, we'll begin this morning, Genesis chapter 6, and we'll go to verse 6 again. And just in mentioning, and the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. Now, it's man who is causing the problem. The birds and the beasts aren't causing problems at all, but they're going to die along with mankind on the earth. And God is going to save a select few. And everything we see today as far as people and as far as animals trace their ancestry going to the ark. So every bird you see had an ancestor, some common ancestor long ago that was in the ark. Same thing with cattle, same not the fish. Fish didn't die in the flood, nor did the fish need to be in the ark. Fish were just fine. That would go concerning whales and dolphins because they can survive in water while they need air. They simply swim up to the surface and they get air. But for the rest, not that skilled of a swimmer. While dogs can swim and people can swim, not that successful of a swimmer, aside from the fact that you would have to tread water for a long, long time. This is going to be more, the flood is going to be more than 40 days and 40 nights, considerably longer. That's how long it rained. That's how long you have the windows of heaven opened and the rain coming down. But that's not the only direction the water came. It also came from the fountains of the deep. They were broken up. And you have water coming from two directions. And of course, then you have everything rising to where there is no land. There's no dry land whatsoever. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in time. So, we have made mention, I just want to bring this in again, from creation to the flood is 1,656 years. We know this from Genesis chapter 5. Everything there given to us in the genealogy that goes from Adam and to Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, all right, has numbers to it, numbers of years. And we can look at those numbers of years and we can add them together and we can come up with a number, and the number would be this. And I invite you also to do the math that Methuselah, we made mention last week that the name Methuselah means when he dies, judgment, that Methuselah does die the year of the flood. And you can work out the numbers on that. Did he die in the flood? Don't know. Did he die a few days before the flood? I don't know. But he died, and it was the very year of the flood. Now, we have, of course, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It's going to be this family with their wives, Noah and his wife. They are the parents of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and they have wives. And as we have said, we'll say it again, every attribute found, human attribute found on the earth today is found in them, in the genetic code that they held. We all trace our ancestry back to Noah, every single one of us. Now, let's continue on in this. So last week we read 9 through 12. This week, though we read verse 13 and a little bit further, let's read some things. So we'll begin in verse 13. And God said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth." So he is going to put an end to the violence. And this is the way he's going to do it. Now, do not think that this is going to be a local flood. Because if that's all it was a local flood, well, his intent was to kill all of mankind. All of mankind would have to be basically gathered in a specific valley somewhere or a specific region of the earth somewhere, flood that region, and then what happens when somebody toward the edge walks out of it, walks up into the mountains? What happens then? Also, why would you need an ark? You wouldn't need an ark. All you have to do is nor would you have to gather all the, and of course God will send the animals to Noah. Noah does not gather them up. He wouldn't, that would be one challenging job. They come to him. There would be no need for an ark. All God would have to do is just say, okay, you get out of this area because I'm going to flood it. Very much like when he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, when he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, he didn't destroy the entire earth. He just destroyed those cities and brought Lot and his daughters and his wife out. Now, let's continue on. Verse 14, and here we are. Here we have specifics. Make yourself an ark. We'll discuss that word in just a second. An ark of gopher wood. So here is what's to be made, and here is exactly the material it's supposed to be made out of. When God is specific, when he gives a specific command, that means everything else is excluded. To properly obey God in this is to make an ark, and it's to make it out of gopher wood. Well, what's gopher wood? I don't know. I don't know what that type of wood is. But I do know by looking further into the writings of Moses, just the writings of Moses, that Moses does mention other wood. He does mention other things. Papyrus, cypress. He mentions other wood. So we can pretty well understand that if this is a specific wood, and he also brings about other names of wood, we can know, well, that those things cannot be gopher wood. Otherwise, he would have called it papyrus, or he would have called it cypress, or he would have called it something else. But he doesn't. What exactly this is, I don't know. I can just think on my own that it must be something that would obviously float well in water, that would take the stresses that would come about that's going to be in this flood. They're going to come about because of this is not going to be a gentle rain. This is going to be a monumental flood. It's a storm like this earth has never had. And that this is where the waves take over the world, and they're not stopped by any continent. They're not stopped by any mountain. And gopher wood will have to be something that can withstand all the pressures necessary. Sometimes, and this is something that it can happen on the seas, is, you have waves. And you can have waves that are so high with troughs in between, or valleys in between, so narrow that literally you can have a ship where the prow of the ship is on one peak, the stern, the back of the ship is on the other peak, and it's not supported in the middle. Okay? And the ship can break in half right there because of that. And there are certain shipwrecks that they think could be what happened in certain shipwrecks, there was no central support. Well, if gopher wood is chosen, God knows that gopher wood can take whatever it is that they're going to have in the flood. He knows it's going to be, and he knows that the dimensions he gives, the proportions he gives to it, is going to be proportions that you're not turning this thing over. It's going to remain upright. And we need to understand that we go now to the word ark does not mean boat. That word doesn't mean boat. That word means box or chest. He is commanded to make a box, and it's going to be huge out of gopher wood. Now God hasn't, we're still in verse 14, so he doesn't know how big this is supposed to be just yet. He's about to get it. And but this is the same word, identical word in Exodus 2 and verse 3. But when she could no longer hide him, this would be the mother of Moses, she took an ark of bulrushes for him. The him is Moses, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. So it's the same word. And this is an ark made out of bulrushes. It would be buoyant. She is going to make it watertight so he doesn't get wet. He's not just sitting or laying in this wet ark of bulrushes. She's going to make it watertight. And so this is the same wood. All right, so gopher wood. What's gopher wood? We have no idea. Now, we go to verse 14. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. Okay, so this is the next part of it. You're going to make an ark. You're going to make it out of gopher wood. And in this ark, you're going to make rooms in the ark. All right, so this is going to be a sizable thing. He doesn't know how big it is yet. It's going to be sizable. There are going to be rooms in the ark, and you're going to cover it inside and outside with pitch. Now, last week we talked about that this would be watertight, supremely watertight. That no water is not very likely to get into this, and it's got to be on the water for over a year. Like I said, it's not 40 days and 40 nights. The flood lasts for a year, little more than a year, because you've got a lot of water that's got to cover everything. Then you've got a lot of water you got to get rid of. And that's going to happen by different means in which that's going to happen. And as we well can know, there are in fact oceans underneath the oceans. There are massive aquifers underground and under the oceans themselves. We know that. And all that water has to go somewhere. So this has to be prepared for making that journey, which there really is no journey. It's just surviving. It's just got to be floating. It has to be floating for over a year. And the pitch is going to protect it from other things that can be found in the ocean. As we made mention last week, there are things in the ocean that love wood, and they'll eat wood. Worse than termites. There are, I believe, a type of worm that will go in, and your wooden ships of the past, they always had you could call it a shelf life for their hull, and they would have to go into dry dock and make repairs or replace things. They had to take care of what those worms did. If it's covered in pitch, that's going to keep them out. They're not going to be attracted to it, and they won't be able to get to it because it's covered over. We have a very similar thing of creosote. If you've ever been around railroad tracks, there's a smell that is there with the railroad ties. Especially if you're there on a hot day, you can smell it, and it's that creosote. The railroad ties are coated, they may be soaked in creosote, and that's to keep termites out of them. You wouldn't want a house that has creosote on it. It just would smell terrible. But it would work. it would work. Now, here is this specific. You have rooms. How many rooms? It doesn't say. But here we come to the dimensions. And this is how you shall make it. It's the length of the ark shall be 300 cubits. Its width 50 cubits. Its height 30 cubits. Now, here's our dimensions on the ark. And he says specifically, because he has to, you're making a box. That's what he says. You're making this massive barge. See, ocean-going barge. And he says 300 cubits for its length. And you could say, well, we could figure that out, that it's, the longest measurement is going to be its length. But it's got to be specific, because he's got to tell you how wide it is and how high it is. Otherwise, you could get all this confused. One could definitely have thought that it was 30 cubits was the width and 50 cubits was the height. But that's not it. And he's specific. 50 cubits is the width, 30 cubits is the height. And so we just go, and this is to scale. This is basically what the ark, in as far as its dimensions are concerned, or its shape, and what it would. Of course, this would be at a great distance, but this shows its proportions: 300 cubits, 30 cubits high, looking straight onto it, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. Okay, it's very long. And, okay, so what is a cubit? Well, we can simply do this because we can know. It's 450 feet long. 450 feet long. That is 1.5 football fields long. 45 feet high, 75 feet wide. And it is probably going to have a draft. That is, how low it sits in the water, it's probably going to be at the halfway point, at the 15 cubit point is how low it's going to be in the water. Now, as we made mention last week, this is going nowhere. All it's got to do is float. That's all it's got to do. It has no sail, no rudder, no way to steer it, because there's no place to go. The world will be just water. There's no place to sail to. And it's just going to float. And it's going to do it very well. And it's just got to stay upright and remain watertight, which it's going to do very, very well. Now, we continue on. Verse 16, you shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. So we start with the window. The window, this is all specific, so it has a window. But it just mentions one. It doesn't say windows. How big is the window? We don't know. And it isn't specified how big the window is. But there's just one, but it's got to be 1 cubit from the top. It's got to be. There's one, and it's got to be 1 cubit from the top. That's all that is given, at least in the text. All right? The door. The door is on the side of the ark. How big can the door be? It doesn't say. But it's not to be on the top. It's not to be on the front. It's to be on the side. On the side of the ark is where that's specific. Okay? And then it's to have decks. These are floors. It's to have a lower floor, a middle floor, and an upper floor, or lower, second, and third decks. So it has multiple decks to it. It's not just one big hollow box. So one would think, now this is speculation on my part, but I think it's a logical thing to do. God doesn't say it, and the text doesn't give any kind of hint in this, but I would expect that you would put the larger animals in the bottom, medium-sized animals in the middle, and the lightest animals on the top. That would just seem the way to go. And where the 8 people reside, it could be in any one. It's probably at the top. I think that would be the preferred place, but I don't know. I don't know where they might reside. But let's just look at this. The ark would look something like this. We'd do a cutaway, and I've got, if you can see, I've put a small window at the top. I've put a door at the side, and these are your decks. And of course, the top is not a deck at all. You don't want to be there, and there is no door to get to the top. So this is just a cutaway view. And of course, there would have to be ramps and ladders or stairs and other ways of getting from one deck to another. And inside this, he's going to be specific that you're to have food, to store food for yourselves, Noah and his family, and the animals. It's supposed to be in there. We go now to 17. And behold, I myself am bringing floodwaters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. Now, let's just say something for a moment. If the Bible is not from God, if this is a fable, there's an awful lot of evidence that cannot be faked. And it goes everywhere from places like, not limited to, the Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon, the Colorado River is not an explanation for the Grand Canyon. That's the one they present, but it's incapable of doing it. Why? Now, one is that the source of the Colorado River is about a half a mile lower than the top of the Grand Canyon. All right, water can't flow uphill and begin eroding the top and then come down to where it wants it. There has to be a path for the water made first. Something big had to have eroded, had to have gouged out through cavitation, through other means of water, gouged out the Grand Canyon. And then comes along a river, Colorado, that flows into it, because water always goes downhill. It takes the path of least resistance, and that is it. But that's not the only place, not by far, not by a long shot. We have mountain ranges where there are animals that have been, large animals that have been buried there, and we can well understand they were buried alive, and they were buried together, buried simultaneously. Their bodies are intertwined, or I should say, their bones are intertwined. And here is one of the things about this earth. It is extremely rare that an animal today dies somewhere, gets buried, and fossilizes. That's an extremely rare thing to happen, as we can well see. Something dies, what happens to it? Well, you have scavengers like buzzards, wild dogs, whatever. Scavengers come around and they scatter the bones, and then the bones slowly just disintegrate. Or maybe you'll have bones that are there, but you don't have much. You don't have much there. But when it comes to what occurred from the flood, there's a lot of things that we can see. A lot. And we made mention of this before, make mention of it today, that at places like the Valley of the Whales, which is in the Sahara Desert. It's in Egypt. In the desert, an area that has, among other things, whale bones, but not just whale bones. Other types of marine animals, mollusks and the like, all right there. Well, how did that happen? There had to have been seawater over it at one time that went away. And that whatever was in that valley got trapped. There was no more swimming out of that valley to find other water. They got trapped, everything evaporated, they died, and you have bones that bleach in the desert now. But we have God saying there's a flood water. He's going to flood the earth, and we continue in this. If this is a myth, it sure is a fortunate myth that there is so much evidence about it. Now, we'll do this a little bit more in depth later, just not today. But how many cultures, ancient cultures, have what are known as flood myths? How many? We can know this. If you have cultures that talk about, and I mean very, very old ones, Babylonian, Sumerian, Egyptian, Chinese, ancient civilizations that have a story of where a god, the god, or gods are angry, bring a flood upon the earth, and it is worldwide, and a few are saved by way of a vessel of some sort. And from that few come the rest of humanity. It seems like there would be a common beginning for that, a common source, that it gets confused and muddled and gets changed in time. And the Epic of Gilgamesh would be one of those places, Epic of Gilgamesh. And we will talk about this in more detail. But it does in that, and it is It is extremely ancient. There are many versions of it, as a matter of fact, of those that took it, like the Assyrians took it and they have their own version of it. The Babylonians have it, they had their own version. Sumerians have it. But it is very similar, and there is a particular person. It's not Gilgamesh. Personally, I think Gilgamesh is Nimrod, but that's just my thinking. And they've made him into this demigod. But there is someone living in Gilgamesh's day who's extremely ancient, and he survived a worldwide flood. And Gilgamesh goes to talk with him to get some advice. All right, that's just one of many. When you have the Aztecs with a similar story, what does that tell you? They're on the other side of the world. What does that tell you? That tells you there's a common source in all this, and maybe the common source is not a myth. Maybe the common source is something did occur in the past. And everyone would have known it because we all come from the same ancestry. Got it from Shem, who passed it down, or from Ham, or from Japheth, passing it down to their children, and then to their grandchildren, and on down it goes. Now, as people spread out, things become twisted. And yeah, in Moses' day, because Moses is writing Genesis, in Moses' day, there would have been quite a number of plague myths. But he's bringing the one in that this is the source, and it's not a myth. This is the one. Now here's another thing that we need to say in all this, and I mentioned it very briefly. This would be one lucky myth to where everything seems to be pointing at this is a fact. Everything is pointing that there's a lot of facts about this, of things pointing to some enormous flood in the past. Some enormous flood. And everyone seems to have something to say about it. And I remember an anthropology professor a long time ago posed because he admitted, yeah, he was talking about, he was an atheist, yes, talking about these various flood myths, and also that of things around the world that would suggest, actually demand, there had to have been a flood. And how do you have all these flood myths? And he would just shrug his shoulders. You know, it's kind of weird. It's just kind of weird. That's as close as he ever got to acknowledging the truth. It's just kind of weird. And it's just, I will shrug it off and I will continue on. It was his attitude in this. But let's continue on. So we go to verse 18. But I will establish my covenant with you. That's God will establish a covenant with Noah. And you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. So here we have all the entire human population after the flood is going to be in that ark. Okay? And in those days, I think, you know, there's a door in that ark. If you wanted to go in that ark, I don't think God would have stopped you. I don't think He would have. If you had faith that there was a flood and that's the solution for the flood, when that door was open, I personally believe God would not stop anybody from doing it. But this is the total population. You have Noah. We don't know his wife's name. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, we don't know their wives' names. But from them, Shem, Ham, and Japheth is going to be the entire population of the earth. From them. And we will get there. Well, actually, that goes beyond the flood, but we'll just do a little bit of where there are very ancient names of civilizations, ancient names of countries. And that would be one of those other lucky things that the Bible got right. How could the Bible have been so accurate about these, just like the first names of these civilizations that they took? How could the Bible have known that if it's just Moses doing it, just Moses faking it? Well, he would get something wrong. As a matter of fact, he would get a lot of things wrong. But God is behind this, very much so. So we come to verse 19. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Let's just continue on. Of the birds after their kind, of animals after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind, 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. And you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it for yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them. Verse 22, thus Noah did according to all that God commanded him, so he did. Everything from the gopher wood to the making of rooms to the door, the window, the pitch, the decks, the food, everything. And notice that 2 of every kind, verse 20 again, will come to you to keep them alive. They'll come to you. There is no hunt. There's no hunt that Noah and his family have to go on to gather these up. They'll come to him. That would be an impossible task. They'll come to him. So, is this miraculous? Yeah, I think we could very well say it would be miraculous. And what I'd like to know is what the living people there would have thought in seeing animals going into the ark. What would you have thought? And we need to understand that there only has to be 2 of every type. How many different varieties of dogs are there? How many breeds? No idea. I have no idea. Too many. For you dog lovers, I'm just kidding. There's a lot. Dogs are great things. I'll just have to back that up. Dogs are great things. You can have breeds, breeds that actually were for lion hunting, believe it or not. And they're breeds that are for rat hunting. They're breeds that are just, well, let's just face it, they're great company. And that's about as good as they're going to get. But you only had to have 2 dogs, of which every breed will come from those 2 dogs. What did they look like? I have no idea. But they would have had all the genetic material to where you could have a Mastiff and a Chihuahua. Okay. And that's powerful genetics. And everybody has to agree with that. Everybody has to agree. There's powerful genetics found everywhere. Everything living, there's powerful genetics. And there didn't have to be every variety of sparrow. And there's a lot of sparrows. It didn't have to be every variety of this or that or the other. Just 2 of every type. And that's very similar wording to what is written in Genesis chapter 1, of where he makes kinds. He doesn't make every different type of sparrow, but I have a feeling that after 1,565 years, there would have been a wide variety of sparrows by that point. He doesn't need all of them. And we need to say this as well, because this is one of those things that people just want to. Matter of fact, I saw here recently, it was a claim that the flood, Noah's flood, proves the Bible is entirely false. Well, congratulations on that. You might want to look at the evidence. But All right, how do you get every animal, every possible animal on the ark? Well, you don't. You don't. All you need are two of every kind. Two of every type. Plus, all right, what about dinosaurs? What about elephants and hippos? What about them? Well, it doesn't say they're going to be coming. They're going to be coming 2 by 2. But it doesn't say they're coming as full-grown adults. They don't have to be. They can be adolescent. They can be considerably smaller and put on the ark. That's all that it has to be. You don't have to have full-grown dinosaurs coming in. Were there dinosaurs on the ark? Personally, I believe there was, because we can see that dinosaurs died in the flood. And if every type of animal was going to be in the ark, dinosaurs would have to be there. Have to be. That doesn't mean they're going to be vicious or anything like that. Obviously, there are going to be big cats in there and bears in there, at least 2 of each set. And they're having to deal with things that today would be dangerous. But God's going to solve the problem, whatever it is. God's going to solve the problem, and to save them, they're going to be going on the ark, but they don't have to be full grown. You don't have to have, a several ton dinosaur walking in there. You can have a considerably younger one that doesn't weigh near as much. But we have just a little bit of time, and I want to take, because I promised some of you I would do this, I'm going to take a moment just to show what is, well, the works of very ancient men. And we don't know who they were. There are claims to know, but we really don't know who did it. Were these pre-diluvian? That is, were these things from before the flood? I can't really answer it. Could it be after the flood? Yeah, it could be. But here are some things that I think could survive a flood. I think they could, because of the way in which they were constructed. But this, just regardless, it is to show the brilliance of men in the past and their ability to do things. This is in Bolivia, and I want you to see these stones. Here is what I would no doubt an average human being standing there in front. These stones are not laid down like we would lay down stones for a castle or bricks for a building today, where we put them up in one row upon another, upon another, upon another. And what happens if you have an earthquake, there's going to be this back and forth movement of the bricks as the earth shakes, and they're going to fall apart, or you can't help it. But if you build things like this, one massive stone perfectly fit together, perfectly. These stones are not accidentally found and, it just happens to make this nifty shape, we can put them together. These have been shaped, and they've been shaped by skill. And they've been shaped. This is not the easiest way to do this, obviously. It's not. You do this because you want to do it, and you do it because you want it to last. This would be someone, I have no doubt, who's seen an earthquake or two and has come up with a solution. Bigger rocks can help, but bigger rocks are not the solution. We've got to do things like this, and it survives to this day. When was this done? We really don't know. There are those that will say they know and say they know who did it, but really we don't know. These are extremely ancient structures. And notice the very complex angles in this, especially around this huge rock. It's like an anchor rock there. And you have shapes such as that rock. And then that rock has to fit in all of it. And you have in this ability to stop any kind of side to side or even up and down motion, because these are locked into place. They're locked by each other. There's no mortar involved in this. They're locked in there. This took skill and a lot of power to do it. Somebody placed those there, and these are not small things. Now, we come to this next one, and then this is extremely complex, and I want to hang on a second. All right. It's an animated thing, and it doesn't matter. I'll just let it run. It's just saying that this is 10 sides. And this would be another thing that you might call a locking stone. And all these, everything fits in here. And it's perfectly carved. If you've ever had to cut angles in wood, you know you've got to get the angles right. Now, cutting them in large rock, you got to get that right. How many times are you going to be able to take a rock, like with a 2x4, did I get the angle right? I just take the 2x4, put it up next to the other one. No, I didn't get the angle right. That's not right. And I can go and I can recut and bring it back and see if I got the angle right. With stones, you can't do that because you're talking about something extremely heavy. You've got to get it right, know you've got it right, and then you put it together. You know what you've done. And this is the work of very, very ancient people. And the people of the past were not dumb. They're made of the same stuff as you and me. And you know, we talk about not wanting to be prejudicial, but very often you have people that they think of those in the past as being dullards, as having no sense whatsoever. And it's very prejudiced. I mean, they're dead and gone, okay, so they can't complain about it. But thinking of those in the past, somehow they didn't know much of anything. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. I remember a friend of mine from high school, when we were talking about things like that, he said, oh, I could do that. I can just take some stones and know how to put them together. Taking a few pebbles and placing them cleverly together is not the same as this. Not by a long shot. This takes extraordinary skill and knowing what you're doing. And remember, it's got to be a structure that can hold up and not going to fall over. It takes quite a bit of engineering work to do things like this. But okay, we will continue on next week, and I want to thank everybody for being here.